Okay. Today's lecture is going to deal with the concept of utility, in particular diminishing marginal utility. And it is an important concept because it is the basis for many decisions that both consumers and producers are going to be making. So first, let's start with the definition of a few concepts. Utility is the satisfaction that you derive out of consuming a good or a service. So we're talking about how happy the consumption of that good makes us. We can measure this in utils. Yes, we economists have particular names, so we don't have an objective way of measuring utils, but it's kind of the pleasure or how much you would like that particular good, which is reflected in your analysis or your measurement of utility. We also have the concept of marginal utility. In economics, whenever we say marginal, we mean extra, one more unit. So marginal utility will be the satisfaction that you will derive out of one more unit. Total utility, on the other hand, is going to be the satisfaction that you derive out of consuming all those units. So, diminishing marginal utility refers to the fact that as we consume the next unit, the satisfaction from that extra cup of coffee, next cup of coffee, is going to be less than the satisfaction from the very first cup of coffee. Could this apply to cars? Yes, the first time that you drive your brand new car, driving it out of the showroom, this is probably going to be the highest level of satisfaction that you will derive. Actually, you should derive that high level of satisfaction because your car just lost 20% of its value. So you may just as well have enjoyed that drive. The next drive is going to be less exciting, and therefore the diminishing marginal utility. There are some goods that have increasing marginal utility. Can you think of any that would be giving you more pleasure with the second or the third unit than it did with the first? We'll probably use that as a homework assignment or maybe some kind of discussion board assignment. So who is interested in utility? As we said, both consumers and producers are interested. Consumers are interested because they would like to maximize the satisfaction from their budget. They want to be able to have the most total pleasure out of the money that they spend. In other words, we don't want to have overspent on one good and underspend on another. We want to be in an equilibrium. More about that in a minute. Producers, on the other hand, are going to be trying to price additional units to sell to you, even though you might not really be tempted to buy it. So, tying purchases, buy the first one at full price, get the second one at half off. That is another example why producers are going to be interested in diminishing marginal utility. Buying the second pair of shoes at that same moment, for most people, I understand that some of you are going to get very excited even if you buy 10 pairs of shoes at the same time. But buying the second pair would have given you probably more pleasure and satisfaction if it was bought at another shopping spree or at another shopping trip. So in order to encourage you to buy that second pair of shoes right then and there, they're going to tell you buy the first one at full price, and you can get 20% off on the second one, you can get half off on the second one, and so on and so forth. So the more units you buy, the larger will be the discount to tempt you. So now, how do consumers maximize their satisfaction? What we're going to try and do is reach an equilibrium where the marginal utility of a particular unit divided by the price of that unit will be equal to the marginal utility of the next unit divided by the price of that next unit. In other words, let's say that you're looking at, you're going out and then you're looking at how much satisfaction you would get from spending money on the next slice of pizza and you compare that with the satisfaction that you would get from going to the movies, spending that same amount of money to go to the movies. And what you're trying to do is have the two equal, because otherwise the total satisfaction is going to be smaller. And we will do an exercise later on. Producers and marginal utility, as we said, they're going to try and look at manipulating your demand and selling more than they really would have been able to. So if we had no budget constraint, if the goods were free, or if you had all the money that you really didn't care how much you're paying for goods, then you would have reached your equilibrium. And the equilibrium would look as follows. Marginal utility of A equal to marginal utility of B equal to marginal utility of C, and you probably would like these to be equal to 0. And what would that mean? It means that you have reached complete saturation out of all of those goods. If you were to use another unit of A, B, or C, these would be negative numbers. Now, what does a marginal utility of -5 mean? It simply implies that it will make you sick. So if you are having your 10th cup of coffee, then that would probably give you negative marginal utility, and that's someplace that you really don't want to go. But again, since most of us do have a budget constraint, then we will be reaching a point where marginal utility of A divided by the price of A will be equal to marginal utility of B divided by the price of B, and so on and so forth. So when we divide this by the price, we are implying how much utility you get for every $1 that you spend. So this is the one that we're going to be using more often. So now let's try and work through one of the problems. Okay. So here we have a table that shows two goods, good A and good B. And these are quantities of A and B that you are going to be buying, purchasing, consuming. And we want to know how we feel about that good. Well, you see that marginal utility is decreasing, as we said, diminishing marginal utility. So the way you would read that is the first unit of good A gives you 15 utils of satisfaction, which means that since you only had one unit, then the total would be 15. Now, for the second unit, it gives you less satisfaction, 10 units, and 25 is how much utility you get from both, 1 plus 2. Okay, so that's your total utility. The same goes here for good B. Now, when you're looking at marginal utility of A divided by the price of A, you're looking at how many utils do you get per dollar spent. Well, for that, you need to know the price. And here you have the price of good A is $5, while the price of B is $2. And you have a budget of $16. You want to spend it in such a way as to get the most satisfaction from the way you're going to be spending the $16. So now, the only two columns that are important, that are going to be valuable in your decision making, will be the ones that give you satisfaction per dollar spent. Because if you look at those goods, good A and good B, which one do you like more? Well, the first unit of A gives you 15 utils, while the first unit of B gives you only 10 utils. So that one is more exciting. But when you correct it for price, you see that this one gives you less utils, fewer utils per dollar, only 3, while B, marginal utility of B, gives you 5 utils because it is cheaper. So when you're going to be spending your money, you're going to be spending it based on those two last columns. So which one are you going to be consuming first? Well, obviously the one that gives you the most satisfaction per dollar spent. And that would be this one right here. So you will be buying first 1 unit of B, and that is going to be equal to how much? How much did you spend? You spent $2. Next, well, this 4 is still higher than 3, so you're going to take the second unit of B, and that's another $2. Now at this point, well, you're better off with A. So you take 1 unit of A. How much did you spend for that 1 unit? $5, because the price per unit of A is $5. And at this point, you are indifferent. Okay? So if you buy this one, another A, that's another $5. And let's see if we can afford another 1 unit of B. Well, 10, 14, but we have 16, so we still have $2 left over. Good news, we can buy that one too. So we have, this is the way we spend our money, and this is the way we maximized our satisfaction. So how much satisfaction did you get out of consuming good A plus good B and having spent all of your $16? Well, for good A, you were able to buy 2 units, and that's 25 right here. So you got 25 utils from the satisfaction derived from good A. And here you got 22 utils from 3 units of B, and you could afford 3 units of B. So if you add 25 utils plus 22 utils, you're going to have 47 utils as your total maximum satisfaction. Let me point out, if you had spent, let's say, if you had spent your money any other way, your total utility would be less than 47. So, because if you were to give up, let's say, this 1 unit of A and have $5, therefore you could buy 2.5 units of B, your total satisfaction would have been much smaller. You would be getting into 0 marginal utility, and you definitely don't want to go into negatives. Okay, so now we can also point out as to how we're going to be calculating marginal and total. So marginal utility, if you add those up, you are going to be getting your total utility. So 1 unit gave you 15 utils, that's a total of 15. Now 2 units gave you 25, because the first one gave you 15, the next one gave you 10, so a sum of those 2 gives you 25. So if you add up your marginals, you are going to have your total. The same goes here. If you add up your marginals, you're going to be getting your total. So how can you calculate your marginal if you are only given your totals? Well, you are going to be looking at the difference between. So total utility when you had 0 was 0, so the first one would be 15. And then the next one, the difference between those two is 10. The difference between those two is 5. And there is no difference here, so it's 0 right here. The fifth unit of A would give you a negative marginal utility of 5, which means it would have made you sick, not a good idea. So that would bring down your total utility to 25. So what happens if we are off equilibrium? If we are in a situation where we have purchased too much of a particular good, and therefore the utility from that good is much lower. How can we rearrange our spending? So here's another example. You have marginal utility of A and marginal utility of B. And we can see that we like B more than we like A, that particular unit. Maybe this is marginal utility of the 4th unit. And this is marginal utility of the 2nd unit. And we have prices for those 2 units. So if we put that into an equation, you will see that 10 divided by 5 is only 2. And here, 20 divided by 4 is going to be equal to 5. As a result, we are happier with the second unit of B, which gave us 20 utils, than we would be with the fourth unit of A. So what should we do? Well, we should be buying more of B, and we should return some of the A, because that one gives us only 2, and here this one gives us 5. As we return some units of A, let's say that we're going down to the third unit. Is the marginal utility of the third unit going to be higher or lower than 10? Well, since we have diminishing marginal utility, then the third unit's marginal utility is going to be higher. Now, when we're going to be buying more of B, keep in mind diminishing marginal utility. Let's say we're going to be buying the third unit of B, the marginal utility of that is going to be lower, since we have, as we consume more, the pleasure of the next unit is going to be going down. Now, the fact that we have 3 units each doesn't necessarily put us in equilibrium. We have to be able to put the numbers in such a way as to show us equilibrium, so that this ratio, the ratio of marginal utility of A divided by the price of A, and the ratio of marginal utility of B divided by the price of B should be equal. That's something that I'd like you to calculate and tell me what numbers would fit so that you would be at equilibrium. Okay? Make up numbers. There is no set way by which the marginal utilities change. But give me numbers such that they will be the ratio of the two is going to be equal. And at that point, you are once again in equilibrium. So the concept overall of diminishing marginal utility applies to both consumers and producers. You are expected to know how to calculate the equilibrium with a budget constraint and without a budget constraint. You should be able to make the calculations as to how you would spend a limited amount of money and how much would be the total utility from that expenditure. And for the producers, you just have to keep in mind that you are being manipulated as you go to stores and as you are being encouraged to spend more than you really meant to. Based on the fact that the next unit gives you less satisfaction, you probably would only be willing to buy it if the price is lower, since the marginal utility is also lower. That diminishing marginal utility will also explain the downward sloping demand curve. Thank you.